Everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Once again, joined by my good buddy, Mark Darden. How are you, man?
Doing all right, bud.
Doing all right. That's great. So today we're kind of putting the capper on our Image Founding Fathers series, I guess we could call it. And today we're going to be looking at Will Spartacio's WETWORKS, issue 1 to 3. Kind of a what-if situation where it was originally meant to be released in and around late 1992 with the Image Founders books. There were some issues which are addressed. We'll talk a little bit about that in a while when we hit those first few credit pages. So the problem with why it wasn't published is going to be addressed. We'll talk about that. And just comparing and contrasting with the other Image books to see, had it come out around that time, would it have been as successful as the other books, et cetera, et cetera. That's basically what we're going to be doing today.
Oh yeah, Wildcat. WETWORKS. Sorry.
A lot of W's.
Yeah. Why you guys got to be so close? It was an interesting one to look back on. Because it came so much later, it wasn't as lodged into my brain as much as the original 6, because it's like a year and a half behind the guys. It was supposed to follow Cyberforce. Like Cyberforce comes out the next month, should have been WETWORKS, but it took almost a year and a half extra time. And we talked about this before. As a kid and even as a young adult, I was like, I understand he had a family issue and he had to go home and help take care of his family because of his sister passing. And as a younger person, I thought, yeah, but you still couldn't draw a page, even if you only got a page a week done, 20 weeks, that's only 5 months. You'd be done. You'd have the issue out, not a year and a half. But I recently went home to take care of my mom after my dad passing. And for 2 weeks, like, all I did was look out for my mom and get things ready for her to move. And at the end of the evening, I was like, there's physically time to do other things, but I'm capped. I'm done. I'm just going to go take a walk and go to bed. So yeah, I totally understand now why it just didn't get done until that was dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you know a little bit of the behind the scenes, it starts to make sense. And yeah, I would totally agree with you. It's like, when you're working on an illustration, on a comic book, whatever it is, there's always kind of a startup period, I guess is what I'd call it, where like the first 10, 15 minutes, I'm kind of going at it a little slow. And then you get into the groove, and then you hit, the half-hour mark, and then you can go in for 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours and really work out a lot of stuff and get some work done. Doing it in little increments of like, oh, I've got 10 minutes here, I've got 15 minutes here in a day, really doesn't work, because you're really not going to accomplish a lot in that 10, 15 minutes. It's almost like, a car starts off in first gear and you're in first gear for a while. Then you start shifting up and getting that fifth gear and getting ripping and roaring. It takes a little while. So, doing that in little increments like that between obviously what is also probably a fairly sad and stressful situation as well. Yeah, it doesn't really work. And I would agree with you. As an adult now, knowing a little bit more about the world and these kinds of situations, yeah, it makes total sense that you kind of have to put this aside, the comic book work, to take care of the family.
Yeah, I had just recently, there was a scene I needed to write four pages, and for weeks I'd been like, I'd already done an attempt before, and I was germinating all the ideas of everything that needs to be in it, but it still had to literally like get a day to myself where I sat down and really hammered it out and worked on it, and then like took a break, came back to it, and like, yeah, okay, this goes here and that would follow. And just a 4-page scene, and it's like I needed like a day to myself, just committing hours to really get it done. So yeah, like you said, you got to get in the mode and you got to have some time to let the ideas germinate and come together.
Yeah, when you're not in it, like as a kid, obviously I was drawing and stuff, but I wasn't yet producing comics and publishing and printing and all this stuff. There's a huge, like, people, it's like anything in art. I've talked about this before, where it's kind of like an iceberg, right? Everyone sees what's above the water, but they don't see, the rest of the iceberg, all the work that goes into the thing that you see. And funny enough, when we're doing this stuff, a lot of it is up here. A lot of the work is done up in the head, and once you've sorted it out, it can kind of go, either you're typing the story down or you're drawing something, and it can go and become something. But a big part of the work is kind of cerebral in your head. And to get those ideas out, sometimes, like you said, you need kind of time to work it out and sit there and think about it and then really work it out and get it down on the page. And it just doesn't happen in 5-10 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
At least very rarely does it. In those rare instances where something comes out really quick, you're just like, oh, it's like a blessing, because it's a lot harder than that most of the time.
Yeah, and as I was writing it, also a lot of ideas that I had where I started conceptualizing it on the page and what the artist is going to need to do, and then picturing like, well, if this is here, there's not space for this. So can I combine these two ideas, or this one's not as important, so I'm going to let that one go and jettison
Yeah.
it. The artist can't put everything on this page. It's too much stuff. It won't be space to develop, and it's asking too much too. So yeah, anyway, yeah, like once really conceptualizing piece by piece everything that needs to go on these pages, a lot of mods have to happen.
Yeah, there's constant editing. Basically, you come up with an idea, but you're constantly modifying, changing it, moving it around to eventually, just yesterday I was working on this recent comic book that I'm doing in collaboration with someone else, and it's like just the layout of the panel and the characters in the foreground. I drew the characters in the foreground, then I drew the guy in the background, but then I was like, oh, if I want this to be clear, I need to move this guy's arm down, half an inch. And oh, this guy's arm is sticking out too much, I'm going to pull it back just 3 millimeters back. Like, it's these small little editing adjustments that very rarely does the drawing come out exactly like you want it. You really got to work at it and edit it. So, but anyways, let's get back to what.
Yeah. Back to
So
what.
you were holding up the cover early on.
Yeah.
So WETWORKS #1 is a slight gimmick cover, but these are the kind of gimmick covers I like.
Yeah.
We've got a nice fold out, I guess, mostly gatefold cover with an extra bit at the front. Looks very cool.
Yeah.
Nice poster image.
And the central piece, definitely the best part of it.
Yeah.
The two coolest figures that are the most defined, because that's kind of one of the problems with WETWORKS in the early part is too many people blend together. It'd be like the Turtles if they were holding the same weapons. It's really tough to tell them apart because you end up with these two kind of big guys with Gatling guns, and two guys have little like glasses, and so there weren't enough visual differentiators. Obviously, the guy who was concerned with his face, as we'll find out, like he stands out because he wears armor that the other guys don't wear because he's trying to keep.
He's got the full face mask to protect his beautiful face.
Yeah, but it's kind of like there was, if you were doing like a Mr. Potato Head and you wanted an army of Mr. Potato Heads, but you only were like, oh, I'll put this over on this guy and this. Okay, well, I'll just use this one over on this guy and this one. Not enough options. We're done yet at the beginning of this.
I wonder if that character, I don't know the timeline exactly, but do you know if like Street Fighter 2 was out before this comic? Because there's the character of Vega in Street Fighter 2 who wears the mask kind of for the same reason.
Oh,
he's a very handsome gentleman and doesn't want to get his face messed up.
Yeah, maybe. Good points. These guys took a lot of inspiration from the cartoons they watched as a kid and certainly video games. And yeah, so maybe.
But yeah, what you were saying about the differentiation of the characters too is kind of one of the main kind of problems with WETWORKS. The artwork is stellar. The storyline is okay. I wouldn't say it's horrible. I wouldn't say it's great, but as opposed to some of the really bad storylines that we saw, and I'm mostly thinking of Cyberforce, that seems to be the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the Image founding fathers and their storylines, their initial offerings anyways. So I definitely think WETWORKS stands above Cyberforce storyline wise. But the big problem is the characters looking very similar and kind of, as you're reading the book, there's also the issue with this issue 1 where they refer to the characters by their code names, but also by their real names sometimes. Yeah. So right away, it gets very confusing as to who's who. Had they stuck to one or the other, that probably would have helped a little bit. But yeah, one of the unfortunate kind of aspects of WETWORKS is that they all kind of generically blend together into these like, gold-plated bodybuilders.
Yeah, and I had mentioned before, so it's a pretty good action-packed pose. The problem being is that we don't see an enemy in it. So I really felt like the guys on the periphery, like if the guy on the far right and far left, if those guys had been turned back so that they're shooting back at something and we actually saw that enemy in the background so that we would then know that's the enemy that they're fighting in front of them. Because as it is, I mean, we've gotten those other covers where on, so for instance, on Youngblood, they're all just coolly posed. No problem, works. On Cyberforce, we see them all in it as a team and they're facing off and they're kind of all protecting for enemy coming from a different quadrant. But when you unfold it, you see the enemy in the back. So then like you visually know why they're prepared. And in this one, we just don't get that. We don't get that enemy. We don't know what it is they're blasting away at all. So it makes it's like it's missing that impact. They're doing the thing, but we don't know why.
Yeah, and it would have added this kind of 360 kind of aspect to it where they're being attacked from all sides, right? So
Yeah,
if you do that and then you include, you know, we're going to say the antagonists in here are or later on in the series become kind of vampires and
yeah,
werewolves and supernatural creatures. You got a bunch of vampires with bat wings flying in the background right
yeah,
away. You know who the antagonists are, and then even though we don't see the ones on this side of the characters because of our point of view, the fact that we see them in the background leads us to believe that there are also more of them past the frame over here that these characters in the foreground are shooting at them.
yeah. Should we get into it now?
Yeah, just gonna remind everyone that you know, Wills is also continuing on the Image tradition of big guns and big swords and knives and blades, popularized by Rob Liefeld and Youngblood, but eventually popularized, I think, by most of the Image crew, because even Spawn got into it at some point with his big guns and knives.
Oh yeah, yeah,
90s staple, GI Joe influence, I guess.
yeah, yeah. You got Powers from Hell, which really got to go to the gun store. Um,
Yeah, that was always weird right away early on in the series. Yeah.
yeah, you were mentioning that we get the opening letter as to why there was the delay. Like he just goes ahead and tells everybody and lets everybody in on it. You were talking about it.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, yeah, so basically, if we haven't mentioned before, Will's sister uh had an illness and he was you know, had to put time aside working on the comic, helping out the family, taking care of her, and she did sadly eventually pass away. And that's what's explained here. And I was, you know, appreciative as a kid and even now as an adult, actually, once this issue finally came out, we were able to purchase it to get an explanation, because back in the day we get little tidbits here and there from Wizard, and you kind of, it was almost more rumors than anything else. You didn't know for sure. We didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have instant access to information. So for him to come out and just kind of, you know, give us a rundown of his family situation, why the book is late, definitely did a lot, I think, to create some empathy for Wills and this book being so damn late. Because, you know, as kids, we're a little bit selfish and we're like, where are my comics? I want my
Mm,
comics.
yeah.
But these are the kind of real world situations that we don't necessarily consider. You know, back when you're 12 years old, you don't know what these comic create. You know, to me, the comic creators are almost like rock stars back then. I was thinking like their life was great. They all live,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of these guys live in Malibu or live on the West Coast and LA and stuff. And, you know, they're probably, you know, I always kind of imagined them because of the image boom and all the money they were making. They're all living in mansions and stuff. And some of them were, some of them were. Um, but yeah, it wasn't all rosy on the creator side of things. And I appreciate Will's actually taking the time to mention that in this book. But you were saying about the actual, I will say the text is kind of small,
Yeah.
right?
It's small, and also because they use this paper effect with all these little grooves and shadows, it makes it even more unreadable where you've already got a very thin text. And using lowercase letters are harder to read, and it's small. It's doing almost everything to make it difficult to read this. The only worst example that comes to mind is if you read Death Dealer, and then in the back of Death Dealer, Danzig and Simon Bisley, and also I think the colorist, they all have a write up of like who they are and what they've done, but they do like dark purple on a, or they do like black text on a dark purple background, and with there being like color fades and things going on, like who's gonna read this? Like you're literally destroying my eyes by trying to look at this. Like it's painful. And
Yeah,
they,
another good candidate for that is the Ultimate Warrior comic.
oh,
Man, there's a whole page of text where he's explaining his philosophy of this thing called distrucity, which is like the crossroads between destiny and truth. Anyways, very convoluted because it is the Ultimate Warrior. If you ever heard his promos, then you kind of understand his writing as well. But yeah, it's like red on yellow or red on orange, and you know, almost impossible to read it without really paying attention. And it almost feels like my retina's burning while I'm reading it. So yeah, note to all letterers and people writing out there, especially for comic books, there's a reason why word balloons tend to be white and the actual words and lettering on the inside tend to be black. It's the highest level of contrast. It's the easiest way to read something. It's
mhm.
just that,
Yes.
you want dark as possible on light as possible, or the opposite, light as possible on dark as possible. As you see on this first page, black on yellow, that can work. Yellow's a pretty
Yeah.
light, bright color,
Yeah.
but you got to be careful and keep these things in mind because, yeah, some comics, my appreciation of them is ruined by the lettering. Funny enough, Ash from Joe Quesada is another offender there.
The so onto the comic, and we've talked about this. So Wetworks feels very influenced by the movie Predator from the 80s, which is huge action film with these giant muscle bound guys with huge guns that go into a military scenario. They've got to free some people, and then they end up in a horror film against a monster. And this is extremely reminiscent of that. Literally opening on a typical military. Guys are, in this case, it's a high-tech jet rather than a helicopter, but they're on the ship flying into the scenario. They don't know exactly what they're going into. They've got the mission brief, but they don't have all the details. We've got one of the guys is like trying to have an anecdote, like, like keeping it lighthearted, like the people joking around before they're going to go into a life and death situation. It's so set up like an 80s film in every way, an 80s action movie.
Oh yeah, listen, like to me, going through this book, I was like, this is if you take Predator and Aliens and kind of mix it together, it's basically the plot of this book. He's also doing the Image team book thing where again it's a flying vehicle of some sort, and the characters are gonna jump out, into some sort of facility. It's this plot that we've seen a lot at this point from Image. So unfortunately, I got to take a few points off of Will's series here because it's not very original. And yeah, the joking kind of atmosphere that they've got, definitely reminiscent of Predator as they're flying into that first mission at the beginning of the movie. They're making jokes, and Jesse Ventura is hamming it up in that first scene, which is great. And even the design of the ship here, funny enough, even though it's the Wetworks and the operatives plane that they're flying here, to me the design is a little bit reminiscent of the actual Predator ship in the movies.
Oh, yeah, or a manga style ship.
There's definitely a lot of manga influence in this book as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
cool shot of the ship, and then a cool silhouette of the ship going, over the ocean, past the mountains. It's very neat looking, but we'll see later, like this isn't a great opening page. There's a lot of text. It's not really anything happening. And in a few pages, there's a page that's like, oh, that would have been a way cooler opening page to start on. And you could roll back to this or don't even really need it. Unfortunately. But
Yeah, I always think that your first page, it doesn't have to be a splash page,
uh-huh.
but it helps. Your
Mm-hmm.
first page should be fairly succinct. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to first, Todd McFarlane is a huge offender of this. Sometimes you'd open up that first page of Spawn
Yeah.
and you'd have like a black page, the Spawn, I'm making this up, but the Spawn logo somewhere in the image, and then just a block of text, right?
Right.
It's not the way anyone wants to start a comic book. You can have more text later on, but that first page should be fairly succinct, not too much to read, and hopefully visually interesting or exciting. You know what I mean? And yeah, this is an example of what feels like a page in the middle of the book rather than the first page.
Yeah, the old saying of like every comic is somebody's first, but you don't also want it to be their last.
Exactly. Yeah.
You want them to be like, oh wow, okay, it's exciting, rather than like, yeah, I think I'm gonna try something else. I don't think this is gonna be for me. Um, yeah, they carry on. So we've got them continuing to the going off to the mission. They're inside their ship, which is still pretty cool looking. I mean, I appreciate that they do the backgrounds. Willis, who was doing the different panel layouts, and you would see that already when he was doing X Factor, and then he moved on to Uncanny X-Men. So he was already playing with these non-standard panel layouts, but at Marvel, he didn't stretch as far out. Like they let him go outside the box, but not too far outside the box. And as we see going on through this, it'll get more and more uh, differentiated. But I do really dig where in panel 3, these doors are sliding open and this red light is coming through, and you're seeing the figure that's coming out to talk to them. And I like that effect a lot, where he's coming out of the cockpit. And so they've got a different lighting going on. And then that lighting hits everybody else. Like it's a cool coloring effect.
Well, it's almost like it kind of, to me is again reminiscent of Predator when they're in that helicopter and that red lighting. You got it on their faces there at the bottom panel, like the light from the cockpit reflecting on their faces. I think is a cool effect, color wise. And yeah, to me, it just feels like Arnold talking to the pilots and then coming back to the team and discussing with them. I mean, this could almost be a scene from directly from Predator. And like you said, yeah, one thing I really appreciate from Wills, at least in this first issue, they're gonna kind of get lost a little bit in the next couple of issues. But overall, he does a good amount of backgrounds, very detailed backgrounds, very evocative backgrounds that really define the environment that they're in really well. I also want to mention you were talking about those crazy layouts he's doing. Something that I think he seems to do pretty systematically. It seems to be a conscious choice throughout this first run, the first 3 issues, is these double page spreads,
Yeah.
right? And the fact that he's having panels go like it's almost, you're not meant to read it as 2 different pages. It's meant to be one big page, and the panel layout crosses over, which I think is a fun and interesting idea and kind of different. Probably something he's trying to do to differentiate himself visually from the other image books. And the way he moves panels around, he's not always using that very rigid kind of basic 9 panel grid. The panels don't always line up. There's some negative space at the top and at the bottom there. I like all that. And I think as an added bonus, since sometimes, this comic tends to be a little bit wordy, the fact that he leaves that negative space there at the top, especially on the right-hand side, really leaves a lot of room for the lettering, and putting the lettering out there makes it so that you don't obscure the art as much as you would if the word balloons and the phylacteries were within the panel. So I like that. It kind of leaves room and airs it out a little bit so you can really appreciate the artwork.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. As we'll see throughout these first 3 issues, the panel count is quite low. There's still plenty of story beats per issue, so things do happen. It's not like Youngblood issue 4 where it's like, okay, so the team showed up and they battled a little bit, but almost nothing happened. Like things are happening, but they're not told with a lot of panels. And sometimes that'll lead to feeling like maybe something was left out, or we have to make bigger connections from point A to point B. But there's plenty of story, low panel count.
Yeah, I think that like in speaking to that, there's moments where there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between the dialogue and the art, where it feels like maybe something wasn't, and we've said this about other image books as well, something isn't being shown in the art, so they're having to add it in the either the text box or the dialogue box. And as we've said in the past, if the best is always to have it, comics are a visual medium. People will argue, oh, writing's more important, art's more important. You want good writing, you want good art, but you want a good synergy between both of those as well. And here there's moments where the synergy is pretty good, and then there's others, kind of like some of the other team books from Image, where it feels like they're having to do a lot of explaining in the text and the dialogue, which could have easily been covered visually with the art.
Yeah, you always want good visual storytelling, because that's part of the purpose of reading a comic book, is that all that stuff you normally have to read what the setup of the scene is and the actions taking place, the art takes care of that for you. Now the writing on the
That's it.
page is just the internal thoughts and the conversation going on.
And hopefully, getting to know the characters, a bit of personality, a bit of characterization as well, right?
Yeah, hopefully. Then we get
Hopefully.
yeah, we get the war room scene, which is told very well. And one of the things I liked about this is you've got these generals, you've got these people who are high up in the military and in government, but they all still kind of look pretty cool thanks to the lighting, thanks to their facial
Yeah.
expressions. And I appreciated that as compared to in Wildcats, where they had like the bad guys are having their what almost looked like a powwow luncheon because one of the guys is eating, but you've got like this energy monster from another planet, and you had an assassin all in black, and then you had this other guy who's like sort of Deadpoolish looking, and then there was just like Tony from the pizzeria, uh, who gets sent to the like. It was like, what was this guy even doing at the meeting? He's eating pasta and drinking wine while they're talking about taking over the world. Like maybe now's not the time to snack. Maybe you should be paying attention, or maybe he wasn't the real boss, and they just sent him there and told him like, hey, you pretend like you're in charge, like. I don't, like behind the scenes, like I think I'm probably going to get popped at this, so let's send an underling. He looked ridiculous, but these guys all look cool and
Like they belong, in the scene. Yeah, the thing with that character in Wildcats, even as a kid, I was like, he kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. You've got, the Wildcats, you've got cyborgs, you've got a guy, who turns into a mall or the size of a mall. I don't know if his name is necessarily a reference to that, but I
yeah,
kind of like that idea. And then you've got the bad guys who one is, an alien taken over by another alien. And, again, you said that guy Pike who looks like Deadpool and a Coda assassin. And then you've got Tony, the
yeah.
guy who owns like an Italian restaurant in New Jersey or something. And he's just chowing down on spaghetti and meatballs and a glass of wine. It's like this Italian stereotype in the middle of all these like super characters and aliens and stuff. It was just an odd choice. It was just even as a kid, I was like, why this guy?
Hey, listen, Mr. Hellspawn, like whatever, you could take over the world, sure, but if you want to get anything done after that, you're gonna need my Teamsters.
Exactly.
You're gonna have to carve us off a little piece, so there ain't gonna be no statues of you. Um, I also what I like about this scene though is we've seen Deathblow already at this point, and Deathblow Jim Lee was using a lot of shadows. He was using a lot of blacked out areas, and I appreciate that when we get to these military scenes, whether it's done to make it look like that or not, it does give me that feel so that I'm still recognizing this character Craven, who we've seen before, and Lynch, who we'll see in this as well. It feels connected to that, which is nice because it's dealing with
The vibe is definitely similar. Yeah, 100%. And it's a bit of subtext, but it's like right away you're like, meh, these guys are military leaders and special operations guys or whatever. I feel like they're up to no good, basically, right? You kind of get that vibe here.
yeah, because they're meeting in the dark. They're shadowy figures. And then we get one of the really cool pages, which I really feel like they should have opened on this page. I mean, what an awesome, you get this odd standing figure that's obviously partially cyborg, which again reminds me of like the Reavers influence, same as how Mark Silvestri was working off of that with Cyberforce. I get that impression again, especially because of how our cybernetic arm looks, where it's not all pretty and perfect looking. It looks like technology that's very sort of scrapped together.
Yeah.
But love like the panels behind her. We're getting the action of the guys getting jumping out. So we almost we really could have seen this from the start and then maybe done a flashback to play catch up, or them detailing it as they're moving in. But like right out the gates, we got guys jumping out of this plane, parachuting in, getting ready. You see them in formation, and then you've got this awesome looking cyborg, and the panels behind her are in this weird tech as a border so that it's connected to her, and her text font is very typewriter-ish, so it's like, oh, that's coming from a machine. It's such a cooler page to open on, and like I would much more see this and go, oh, that's different. I need to know what's going on here. I want the follow up versus the other one, like, oh, a ship flying and there's some people talking in it.
Yeah. This
Seen
page
that.
definitely has way more visual impact as a first page. Totally agree with you. It has a decent amount of text, not too much. You know what I mean? So as a first page, that still works. And it's just, again, you want to have an image that kind of pulls you in, that's visually interesting or fun. And I think you definitely get that here. Like you said, the cybernetic character kind of posed in the front looks really cool. The helicopters flying in, the one that's landed, I definitely appreciate Wills Portasio's interpretation of tech in general. The vehicles that he's drawing, the guns and stuff, they all feel real world, as opposed to someone like Rob Liefeld, who I feel just, is coming up with guns that are really big, but
Mhm.
fairly simple in design and not necessarily, don't even necessarily look like they function. These look, all the tech and the military gear looks really functional. The even the character here, the straps, the pouches, he's going with all the kind of Liefeld tropes, but I
Yeah.
feel Wills Portasio just does it a lot better and it's more convincing within that military context. And again, yeah, the cybernetic parts of her arm, like you mentioned, very interesting, quite different from the typical kind of cybernetic look we're getting from things like Cyberforce. Um, Even some of the Rob Liefeld characters who are not necessarily cybernetic but have metal parts or metal armor. Wills goes in a completely different direction. Those guys are kind of still doing the Colossus kind of type of cybernetic look. He's going for something completely different here. And again, with that and his vehicles, again, I definitely feel like he's going with a manga influence, and he's been looking at manga and incorporating some of that stuff into his work here. And just one small last detail that I appreciate as an artist, the helicopter at the bottom that's landed there,
Uh,
clearly manga influence. It's a made up helicopter. It's not a realistic helicopter per
mhm.
se. But the fact that the blades that aren't turning anymore are kind of sagging down a bit, I
Yeah.
think is a nice detail, because
Yeah.
that's kind of a real world detail
Mhm.
that helps, again, because he's inventing the helicopter, it helps ground it a little bit
Uh,
with something that's familiar.
yeah.
And
Having
it
a
does a great
realistic
job.
detail. Yeah. Makes it
Exactly.
real.
You
Yeah.
make something that's fantastic and out there, but then you add that one little touch of realism to it, and then you just buy it, right?
It is odd though to have, and I'm just going to guess that the operatives had to come from a further distance, so that's why they had to be jetted in.
Yeah.
Because it's weird to then have these helicopters fly in and land, and it's like, well, why didn't the jet land somewhere, then get into the helicopters, and then fly in via the helicopters? Why'd they need to parachute in if you're going to land helicopters?
I'm assuming it's because all of that looks really cool and Wills wants to draw all that stuff, you
They
know?
came from different sources. They had to get there from different places. Um, And via the previous page, we do know plot wise that Team Seven, which within the image continuity was this much older team that had been around several iterations. Dane was in the original iteration, so he's the old guy that's still there. But they're being sent in on a mission to get their hands on this biological weapon. They don't know what it is, but there's already a double cross going on. Like on the inside, they're being sent in, but they're not expected to make it back. In fact, they're probably going to be made to not make it back. So they're being kind of not even just left to hang; like they are purposely being sacrificed.
Yeah. And they don't quite explain why. So I'm a little bit confused about that. But I guess, like anything, having been part of the mission, they're going to learn something that, IO, International Operations, doesn't want them to know or to bring back, I guess, and maybe, you know, release that information to someone else. So they're just like, yeah, easiest ways to get rid of them. And that information dies with them,
Yeah,
whatever that is.
yeah. Yeah, so then they're making their access way into the base, but the base they're going into, immediately they're walking into a situation where they're like, well, what's going on here? We just snuck in through this door. There's already bodies on the ground. They're ripped open, so everything's not on the up and up. Like they're already on alert that they're not just the only ones that are doing something right now.
Great use of shadows on this page.
Yeah.
I'm noticing a lot of the characters have a lot of shadow on their figure.
Mhm.
which really works and helps to separate them from the backgrounds. I think that looks really cool and very kind of an astute use of shadows on these pages.
Yeah, and makes sense since they're doing a sneak mission. You know, it's a
That's
stealth
it.
mission, so they
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be out in plain sight. Definitely get that Alien 2 vibe that you were talking about as they're sneaking through this base. They're arriving there after something's already gone wrong.
This is literally the plot to Aliens 2,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
There is a bad tangent on the page on the left where there's the opening of the facility they're sneaking into, but
Yeah.
right below it, because of that guy's head and the fact that the panel border isn't so thick, I almost think I'm like he's got a cap on his head. You know,
Yeah, I was looking at it and almost real quick, like as you kind of, you know, fly by with your eyes, I was like, is his forehead opening up? Like what is what is going on there?
yeah, very weird looking. And then again, totally alien-ish. They get into a facility, there's a biological weapon, they don't know exactly what it is. And then there's this weird betrayal thing where their own government was going to betray them, have them be sent in to try to destroy or acquire this. But then there's vampires and there's multiple factions. You kind of learn this as it's going on. But one vampire is like waiting for them to get close in order to infect them with the biological weapon. Again, so alienish. It's like, you know, oh, get closer so we can infect you with a thing. And
Yeah,
it's, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just storytelling wise, I always thought it was a weird choice. The top right panel where the character's looking into the
Uh-huh.
glass casing that's
Yeah.
holding whatever the biological agent, and those kind of blobs of it, like we're inside the casing with it.
Yeah.
It's just a kind of an odd choice. I don't know how well that works. I don't know if it works as well as maybe he thought it would.
Yeah.
Um,
Reading
if
it
if we're if
visually,
we're just getting a shot of his face looking in without the blobs in front, we would still understand. I think from the previous panel that he's looking into it, and it wouldn't be quite so. Just kind of an odd artistic choice, I guess.
yeah, as a kid, I thought the thing had already gotten out and was getting on him.
Right? Like, yeah, exactly. You're not 100% sure what's going on. And even the treatment of it, the look of it, I almost feel like it was added on later, almost fully in coloring. Like it wasn't actually ever drawn there. So the computer effects and the coloring feel a little bit off and separated from the artwork. It's a little weird.
Yes. Yes, very much. The coloring of the figures versus the effects on this
It's
goo.
completely different, right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
totally. Yeah, they blast one, just one of these, and it gets on one guy, but they don't like, you know, they don't keep it going. So just the one guy gets infected with this biological agent and then is a golden warrior, which
Yeah.
works out conveniently because they get attacked seconds later.
Yeah. And he's going to be saved from the fact that he's wearing that golden symbiote.
Yeah.
Um, little bit confusing on the left there. I think just the sameness of the coloring throughout that omnipresent kind of yellow gold color makes I think the big main panel is good because you've got the contrast of the character with a lot of blues and the yellow, so they separate really well. But every other panel on this page is kind of colored similarly, and it makes it very kind of confusing to read visually.
Yeah, and with those bottom panels on the left page, because they don't have a thick border and maybe an alternate color border, they blend so closely together because it's that same gold color. They really do need to be separated so that your eyes pick up three pieces of action. Because at a glance, I almost take it as just a single piece.
One big panel and like what exactly is going on there. And I think that would be an instance where you want to use a color for kind of symbolism and the effect. Like, yes, we know the symbiotes are gold colored, but maybe if those panels had been, painted colored red or just blue or monochrome or something, they would have stood out and been a lot easier to read.
Yeah. Uh,
You
yeah.
get a bit of that same effect just real quick. The last page,
Uh-huh.
the three panels on the right there,
Yeah.
just below the second panel, kind of same thing happening there, where you've got all the same colors, and it gets confusing. You're not exactly sure what's going on there. I bet you if we looked at the black and white pages, it would be pretty clear. But you get a little bit, I feel, of that same confusion in that sequence there that you do on the left-hand side.
Yeah, and I think you're also talking about, I think it's two panels. It's almost tough to tell if that one in between is a panel or if it's
or part of the bigger panel. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And the lettering placement doesn't help. It's tough to see what the border of it is there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that's his mouth and nose, but I'm almost like, oh, is that a leg from someone else? But yeah, it's his mouth and nose.
Well, because the black kind of border effect that he's got within the panel is also happening in the bigger panel. So it almost it's another kind of tangent thing, right? Where it almost looks like the continuation of that panel, even though it isn't.
Yeah. Very
And
much.
there's even he even throws in, sorry, because I just noticed behind that third panel, there's like a purple colored panel just that's there and there's no point to it.
No, it just varies and throws another shape in, but yeah, it does not help.
Doesn't help in any way.
Okay. So the guy who's just been infected with the bioage is immediately saved from a bunch of gunfire, which also sort of helps protect his friends, even though they didn't know that would happen. And violence amps up, and they make comments. We talked about this where there's these big knives, and they're really having to go at these guys. They're shooting them, they're cutting them up, and then they talk about how on the next page, which is beautiful, but he mentions like, oh, I had to gut him. I had to cut his heart out, and it's like, well, we don't see that. We don't see he's gutted. We don't see his heart out. If artistically he had actually had him splayed open at the chest area, and maybe even saw the heart on the ground, we would have the connection between what you're saying is happening and what we're looking at, because that's not what's going on there. And then the other guy mentions like, oh yeah, I had to take his head off. If he was holding the head in his hand, then we'd like, oh yeah, I totally get what's going on. But you're telling me one thing and you're showing me a different thing. So my brain is trying to put the pieces together.
And that's such an easy fix in this situation to make sure that the dialogue and the art are jiving together. Yeah, just have his chest, ripped open, and have that guy either holding the head, or maybe the head's just off to the left in that puddle of blood on the ground. You know what I mean? Because it's a cool looking panel. The fact that there's no panel around it, it's on the negative space. You've got the blood kind of splayed out. It artistically is very cool, but there's again a disconnect between the dialogue and the art, which leads me to believe that they were probably doing this Marvel style. The plot is credited to Wills and also Brandon, but I feel like Wills was probably doing more of the heavy lifting and drawing a lot of it. And the dialogue writer Brandon Troy in this instance having to come back and add dialogue after, he was probably thinking, okay, I'm going to add a little bit more detail to the scene by throwing in these details. But unfortunately, it's kind of undercutting the art in a way, because what he's talking about, like you said, is not represented in the art.
Yeah, it's too bad he's not saying like, oh, it's still twitching, cut the heart out, and then in panels 2, 3, it could be like the cutaway to the cutting, and then like, because it almost has that reaction.
Yeah, maybe some more storytelling instead of just a couple of cool looking headshots, right?
Yeah. It is awesome though, that open panel and the blood on the floor, and the fact that they go pretty flat, like they don't do too much variation in the blood, so it really stands out against all the color of the figure work.
It's great.
Yeah. Dig it a lot. And then the attack goes on. They're getting attacked by more enemies. And so there's so much more going on with the enemies, and they're getting shot at, and they're kind of like, oh, we don't think we can make it out of here. And their one buddy who's got multiple enemies coming at him, and he's still surviving despite the overwhelming odds and making it happen. This starts to germinate the idea that like, oh, well, if the biological agent saved him, maybe we got to get in on this biological agent thing.
Yeah. Someone put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly there.
Yeah, like there's no way out of here unless we do something crazy.
Yeah, because at the same time, it's like they don't know what these things are at this point. They don't know exactly. All they know is like, well, it coated this guy and saved him from getting shot, so he's bulletproof now. Are these things slowly giving them cancer? Who knows? But I guess in this situation, it's pretty dire. So that's basically, if we're going to survive, this might just be our only option, and that's why they go for it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's almost too bad that the two other people in the scene where the guy was getting shot, if they had been there was it, that was it there. If they had been expendable, and so when the shooting came in, those two people got hit.
It's shot. Yeah, I do find it weird that like they're all shooting at the guy in the middle when if you just aim your gun to the left, you're actually going to hit a target that's not bulletproof. It's kind
Yeah,
of a funny, yeah.
and it would have alluded more to the other people of like, oh no, those two guys just got shot and they're bleeding to death, but oh, our one buddy who got hit by this biological weapon, I just saved him. Oh shoot, the gunfire is still coming in. We got overwhelming odds. Our position's being overtaken. We're not going to be able to survive this. Wait, let's just take our chance. Let's roll the dice. We're going to do this biological weapon thing. And if we die, well, we were going to die anyway. You set it up a little better.
Yeah. Let's encase ourselves in gold.
Yeah. And then the off panel of it, we've got our one guy that we know was already encased. And then as he's fighting, I guess we get this explosion. So that's supposed to let us know that something happened behind him. But I can't visually connect that. I'm just having to assume that, because then the next scene, like, oh, well, they all took the symbiote thing, and now they're blasting away at the enemy. Like,
Yeah, I feel like Wills was saying, well, I've already shown the first character kind of, the glass breaking and him being encased. I've shown that sequence. So I can just kind of, show up with this double page spread and the reveal right away. And everyone, I mean, we kind of do know what happened, but it kind of feels just like we missed a bit. I still think it would have been worthwhile to have at least a short sequence of them, either blowing up the containers or the symbiotes wrapping their body, like a quick little montage shot or something. It feels like we missed a little bit in between there. And
absolutely.
on the last page, you've got two shots of the character Claymore, I think his name is, the first guy who's encased in gold, pretty much doing the same thing. So that second panel could have been taken out and used as kind of a build up to this scene here.
Oh boy, this is just our oh shoot, this is only the second 2-page spread so far.
Oh, there's going to be more though. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's going to be more. But it is a cool sequence. I mean, the shooting that's going on in this page here kind of gives us what the front cover was missing, like where we just see them doing the action-packed thing, but we don't see the enemy and why they're doing it. In this sequence, we get the one guy that's overwhelmed, so we know the enemy here. We know, oh yeah, they must be shooting off at these other guys. Like, oh, why didn't you give us that on the cover? Because here, the cover's a cooler looking image than this is.
But yes, this is more of a storytelling kind of,
yeah. Give us both. Do both.
Yeah. If you kind of meld these two together, you'd get a cooler cover.
Yeah.
Funny sound effects here. Chang Chang. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, and almost the burp burp for shooting. Burp 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 burp.
Interesting choice of onomatopoeias.
There's some cool action scenes below with the panel. The guy that's looking off going that's kind of funny. Of like, oh, I'm shooting off it. I got that taken care of. What's going on over here, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, you might as well have them be like, oh, hang on, we're getting a call. Yeah. No, yeah, pick up the grocery. Okay, cool. I'll see you later tonight.
Yeah. I haven't had much gun training. I was on a trip in Arizona years ago, and there was a place you could stop and pay some money to shoot some guns, and I never done that, so I did it, and it was fun. But out of the very basic training that the guy gave me, he was an ex-military vet, Iraq and all that. He's like, you should always be looking in the same direction that you're shooting or your gun is pointing, right? That's always something you should be doing. This is a comic book. Obviously, I get it. It doesn't have to be fully realistic, but it should at least, be believable, I guess. And when you see a shot like that, it doesn't ruin the comic for me, but it's a bit of a chuckle, it's a funny part. I like that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that pose there, that 2-hand like stab down pose.
Yeah. That's pretty intense.
That one's cool. I like that one.
Well, the whole kind of sequence at the bottom I like, with the panels kind of tilting and everything's a
Yeah.
little bit off kilter. And that last bit where the panels kind of start to break up,
Hmm.
I don't know exactly why he did it and what the kind of story reason is for that, but it just kind of looks cool. It's kind of an interesting effect.
So what we're kind of getting at the end there is you see this action elevating, and they've gone to where they were going to be overwhelmed, and they're almost lost in like the violence. Like
Okay.
you've got the guy who's doing the stab, the other guy getting shot. You can see his mouth open. He's clearly kind of giving a yell, which we don't get to hear.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and then you've got the guy who's hitting this other guy. The blood, you don't see the full enemy other than the arm, but the blood sprays in. And Dane's kind of overlooking his guys as the guy with the blade comes in doing another slash, and there's a bang, somebody's yelling, and it's almost like, and then we just sort of like things happen so fast, it almost went blank. Like we were
Yeah,
just
yeah.
lost in the violence, and I can't even remember everything that happened after that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing I never noticed before on that page, just real
Oh,
quick, before, yeah, I
another
won't be
grand
long.
reveal.
The main image there is
Yeah.
framed a certain way, but then there's like a black band at the bottom of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe the art under there like was actually drawn, and then they realized, oh, with the captions and stuff, it starts to get a little bit confusing.
Oh,
You know
huh.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So then they just, let's just stick a big black band on top of that, because
Yeah.
it's kind of just an odd choice. You could just finish the panel above the other panels there, but I guess they wanted to keep that overlapping effect. So I feel like that the bottom part, the art was probably there, but it was kind of confusing and interfering, so they just threw a black band on top.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought.
I mean,
Um,
I can't see any other reason for it.
and then we get this is such a weird sequence of like the facility blows up, and then like they kind of they do the walk away from the explosion, and it's in silhouette, so no, what happened, but then like, oh yeah, it's a bunch of golden Ken dolls. We survived the enemy, we survived the bigger explosion that went off, and yeah, it's a weird sequence. And then we've talked about this where you've got that close-up panel of Dane's face, but there's almost no reason to have it because the panel preceding it is so large, we could have already gotten that emotion on his face. It would be different if like they went from the silhouette to a slightly more detailed image where we're seeing portions of them, but a lot of it's still in shadow. It's kind of redundant.
It's just a bigger shot of the same face. At worst, you change the angle, you put them in a profile, you give them a different expression, something, but it really does just feel like the same exact shot, just a little bit bigger. And yeah, the Ken doll kind of toy aspect, the missing genitalia is just a little bit weird and off-putting. We had talked about how maybe, you know, you just move Dane's arm over a little bit, and the gun's overlapping where the genitalia would be, and at the same time, there's a bit of symbolism there that kind of works as well. The gun kind of standing in for the
Yeah.
genitalia,
Yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah. Yeah, there'd definitely be a way to cover over the crotch area with the weaponry.
And
And
and you get like a tongue in cheek, kind of a little bit of a cheeky moment.
yes, yeah. And also, we don't have one guy here going, yeah, we were able to survive, but do we really even want to after what we've lost? I mean, if
And
I,
what they've lost are their genitals,
yeah, if I
basically.
don't got my genitals, what was even the
That
point of
was
all this?
that was the cost of integrating the symbiote. The symbiote just disintegrates your genitalia.
Yeah, they may take our lives, but they'll never take our genitals.
Yeah, that detail not very often mentioned in Wetworks lore, but yeah, no more
Yeah.
genitals.
Oh my gosh, I kind of forgot about this. Much earlier in the book, they're talking about the mission, and oh, it was on page one. On very much on page one, is they're talking about where they're going in. Uh, Negative, sir. No one at the base was saying a word about this one, like what the mission is. I'm figuring it's got to be wet work.
Ah,
Roll credits, Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, cue military snare roll.
yeah, yeah. I don't know what kind of mission we got going on in the jungle, but I got a feeling we're gonna have to get pretty predatorial.
Exactly. We're the predators, they're the prey.
Yeah.
Some
Yes. Yeah. We'll see who the predator is.
who's
Ah.
the prey and who's the predator? Fantastic.
Oh, we get back to our military guys. They're screaming because the op didn't go the way they wanted. They sent in Team 7 to do something that, but then we're sending in a team behind them to clean up Team 7 after Team 7 cleans up. But they also blew up the base, which Team 7 wasn't supposed to survive. And it's like, if you could blow up the base with the second strike, what did you need the first strike for? Was the first strike supposed to get the biological weapon out of there? Well, it didn't
Yeah.
make sense that you blew them up inside the base. Like you've kind of twisted back around on your own plot, and it's not making sense. Like you haven't gone in a linear direction. You came back around like the snake's eating itself at this point.
I do like once again the kind of shadowy, vibe to all of these guys back
Yeah,
at IO. And the main guy who's really pissed off here, I forget his name, but he seems to be kind of the
Craven.
guy in the Craven, the guy in the lead here. I
Yeah,
really like the top panel and the bottom panel where it's almost
yeah.
kind
He's
of
like,
cartoony, where the eye is really big and the pupils really small. Like I think it really works well,
yeah,
given that kind of angry, crazed look. It's in those instances where Will's Portasio will go kind of more cartoony, and his art's been compared to Jim Lee's, of course, because they worked in the same studio. Wills is almost more kind of the mentor in the late '80s than Jim Lee.
mhm.
Um, and Jim Lee obviously took a lot of stuff from Wills in his own style. But something that Jim Lee rarely does is go kind of, I don't want to say full cartoony, but basically gives it more of a cartoony bent. Jim Lee doesn't do that very often. He did a little bit with like Jubilee in the X-Men, where she'd be a little more kind of kinetic and cartoony. But I appreciate when Wills goes kind of more in that direction and makes things just a little more exaggerated and what's the word I'm looking for? Dynamic, I guess. There's just, when you compare both artists, there's similar aesthetic, but I do feel like Wils's art generally is a little more dynamic and a little more kinetic and moving than Jim
Mhm.
Lee's.
Yeah, versus Jim Lee is a very picture perfect guy.
A little
Oh,
posier, right, is kind of how I
yeah,
would describe it.
yeah. He's almost too technical. Like he's so
Exactly.
technically proficient that he loses his own creativity in the art at times.
And Wills has got some of that, but like I said, sometimes he'll turn around and just do something really cartoony or really kind of bombastic and kinetic, which I really like.
Yeah, I like how he's done Craven so that I still get that Deathblow connection since I've already seen Craven in Deathblow. I like
Yeah.
how they're in the dark scene, they're the shadowy figures in the background. But also them watching on a monitor what's happening. So these soldiers who are supposed to show up and clean out, and that included wiping out Team 7, are getting laid to waste by Team 7 because they got the gold symbiotes now. But also, what a weird twist that is. Just picture you're in the military and yeah, you're the elite and you normally work around these other guys who are on the lower level, but there's a mass of them and they're on your side. And some of them are still your friends or your buddies, or even if they're not specifically your friend or your buddy, they're like other friends and buddies you got. And then they show up to try to wipe you out and you're immediately slaughtering them. That's a weird emotional moment that is just glossed over here.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, well, we can't fight them. These are our people. No, we just gotta go to town on these schmucks. They're not the other military. It's not like a different military showed up to like try and sneak in and double cross. Um, that would have made it make a little, it's not like multiple militaries were in on this op and then like, oh, it was just for example, like, oh, the French military has decided to betray us and try to steal the biological weapon. Well, then forget them. It's not a separate military force. They're attacking their own people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, not. not exactly the definition of friendly fire, but kind of that idea. Yeah, you're killing your own.
Yeah, to have to make that quick change in the moment of like, oh, here it's our guys. Oh, they're shooting at us. Well, then forget you guys.
But at the same time, is it that much of a stretch? Do these kind of situations ever arise in the actual, American military or any other? We'll never know for sure because these are all
Well,
kind of black ops secret missions. But I'm sure there have been situations where this has happened.
there have been military forces that have had to deal with friendly fire that when they're launching artillery and the artillery ends up hitting their position and taking out some of their own people and like, yeah, okay, imagine being that guy and getting back to base and like you see the guys running the artillery and like, what were you guys like? We just lost 6 of our people because of where you placed that artillery. Oh, so you guys didn't get the communication, or you didn't get
Yeah.
you fired just right, and you were slightly off. That'd be a troubling situation to get into if Willis wanted to make this a whole lot more of a psychological comic.
Well, then that kind of stuff happens. But it's like I remember this is years ago, but there was the Pat Tillman story. Do you remember the Pat Tillman story? He was like an NFL player,
Yes.
and after
Oh
9
yeah.
11, yeah. And it came out first that he was killed by friendly fire and that it was an accident. But then there were questions about it being, almost like, we're going to call it friendly fire, but we need to get rid of this guy because he had started to have doubts about the war and he had started talking about it somewhat publicly and sending letters to his family and stuff. So I don't know for sure what exactly happened there, but there had been talk that, even though officially the story was that it was friendly fire, again, a mistake or an accident, maybe it had been intentional to kind of shut him up, right?
And before that, actually, so the initial story was that he was killed in combat, as if like he had been.
That was the first
That
level
was
of
the
it.
first
Yes.
story.
Yeah,
Then
yeah, yeah.
friendly fire. Then there's more of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Like I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, I know that was out there, right? So.
Yeah. Um. So we keep rolling. We get some more cool color effects of having the red, which is still the cockpit scene, because we've got Mother One, who there's a whole lot going on in the double cross, and there's like a triple cross going on in this because you've got Craven, who's got the setup of we're going to double cross Team 7. They're going to go in, grab these biological agents, but we're going to send in a second strike force that's going to wipe them out. But then one of the guys in the room, and I think his name is Wayan, I think,
Yeah.
who's going to become their boss, effectively, their benefactor, was also in that room. And Mother One was supposed to be the operative kind of running the whole thing, but she's in cahoots with him that she's running the mission, but going to keep them alive and then squirrel away Team 7, now the WETWORKS, squirrel them away and start using them as their operatives. So as the helicopters are shooting down, we still get that cool red effect. Mother One betrays the helicopter pilots and blows that helicopter up and does strikes against the other helicopters and wipes out all this fire coming from the helicopters. And then
She's had a change of heart.
no, this was the plot. This was the trip.
Wasn't she originally intended? She was intending to get rid of these guys, though, right? Wasn't that originally her?
That's what Craven was planning to do.
Okay, so she double crosses Craven.
Yeah, so then you've got Craven's going to double cross Team 7, but Wayan's double crossing Craven, who's double crossing Team 7. So, he's in on the double cross, but he's double crossing the double crosser.
You can see how I'd be a little bit confused there.
You could see that, yes.
We're in the quadruple cross world now. All of a sudden,
yeah, you thought
layers upon layers.
Them, I'm double crossing you, and you were going to wipe them out, but I'm actually going to keep them alive and then use them as my operatives.
That's very convoluted.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with a completely different thing with these two pages here. I'm going to go with color. I kind of just picked up on it looking at these pages here. I had mentioned when we talked at some point, there's a lot of blue and red in this series. That seem to be kind of the overarching colors, apart from obviously the yellowish gold from the WETWORKS symbiotes. But I'm kind of struck looking at these two pages where I'm like, There's red, there's blue, and there's yellow, and these are all the primary colors typically associated with comic books, more mainstream kind of stuff. Superman's costume,
Yeah.
and just how the change of context here in this Image comic, the military vibe, it's a darker, shadowy world, all of that. How those exact same three primary colors can have a very much a different effect in a book like WETWORKS versus Superman or something published by DC. I'm just kind of amazed how those exact same three colors here are being used to much different effect.
Because it's a darker, moodier yellow, blue.
Yeah. They're still using those three primary colors, but they're just doing it in a way that the context is different, the vibe is different, and it really works with what he's doing here. But it just surprises me that, you know, how you can work in these primary colors and still give it kind of a dark feel and atmosphere. And I will credit the colorists for this, because I do think the colors are pretty solid throughout this whole book.
Yeah. And it is a weird plot point where we get to the team. 7 people were sent in to basically pick up this biological weapon, which they then get infected in and gives them these powers and abilities. But then all of a sudden, Mother One reveals that, like, oh, I've had the symbiote thing the whole time, which would make some sense in that Wynn already knows about these things, and so he's got an agent working for him that has one, so they're just trying to get more agents that have them. But it is odd for her to already have hers rather than having been a part of the team that ends up with them.
Well, it kind of undercuts, you know, the whole novelty of the symbiote and the WETWORKS team, where it's like, yeah, she already had it. Yeah.
Yeah. And also too bad they didn't lose a couple of team members, because that would have made the mission more gruesome for them, and also limit down the number of people on the team, because there's too many people on this team.
But another double page splash.
It's spread.
Spread, excuse me. Yeah. You're right. I was getting confused.
Yeah. It's moody, and it's the vampires showing up after the fact to find that their base has been wiped out and their symbiotes have been stolen. And there's this whole vampire versus vampire plot that comes together, where there's the vampire queen, blood queen, who's in charge, but there's a separate faction that wants to be in charge.
Yeah, you can see here with the vampires design, the one kind of element that I was always kind of iffy about and not quite sure what exactly it's supposed to be, the kind of glasses
or
the visor going across and then around the ears and stuff. Always thought that was just such a weird choice. Don't like it particularly, and it's never really explained, so I don't really understand, other than trying to make them look maybe a little bit different aesthetically than other characters in the book. Just kind of an odd choice. There's the one character in the back who's got like a full face mask. It's just a small detail. He's a throwaway character. I don't think we ever see him again, but like maybe something like that, you know, the full face mask on some of these other guys, and maybe a different design or whatever. Maybe that would be a little bit more effective than these rinky dink little visor things that they've got. It always like it makes me think of Geordie LaForge in Star Trek. I'm like, are they blind? Maybe they're vampires, you know, they're sensitive to light or something. I don't know, but it's never really explained, so I'm not quite sure where that choice comes from.
Yeah, and then there's the other thing that's kind of interesting is you think about Willis's background, where while he's at Marvel, he worked on the Punisher, same as Jim Lee. They both worked on the Punisher, and they both worked on X-Men. So he's got the Punisher background with military stuff, and then also he worked on the Legion of Night miniseries with supernatural elements. So I would think that maybe the influence of that series also kind of crossed over, poured into like only a couple issues. So maybe from that series, he still had some ideas, some things he had wanted to do with it.
Well, with the Image guys, we always kind of assume, since it's their first chance to do their own creator own stuff, they're bringing in what interests them, right? So Wills is clearly into the military and vampires, like you said. Clearly, if he brought him, brought vampires into this book as well, he's done it before. Clearly, something that interests him. Where was I going with that?
I don't know.
I know Brandon Choi. I wanted to mention as well.
Oh yeah.
The writer here. I recently found out that he was at least I think in the basic training to be a Navy SEAL, or anyways, he was going off in that direction. So I feel like he kind of, both Wildcats and WETWORKS, maybe WETWORKS more, definitely have kind of a military influence. Wildcats maybe not as obvious as WETWORKS, but they are a covert action team, right? So it's like maybe Brandon Choi's the guy going like, hey, we're kind of doing superheroes, but with a real world bent, with a black ops kind of bent, a covert kind of bent, so, and he's bringing that influence in there, and they're probably trusting him because they're like, well, he trained in the Navy and stuff, so he probably knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, more than they know. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's going to bring us to the end of today's review of WETWORKS issue number 1. If you are out there, guys, still watching the channel and still subscribed, thank you so much. Both Mark and I really do appreciate all your support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you, and it really helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. Speaking of comic books, both Mark and I make our own. You can check out Mark's stuff at Big Cartel. He's got Guano Guy, he's got Darkest Image, and he's got Super, the Kayfabe of a Death. No, that's wrong. I keep getting that wrong every time.
Kayfabe, the Death of a Super. Yeah.
One day I will get that right. And again, you can check all of Mark's stuff out at Big Cartel. For me, it's KingComics.CA. You can check out my Big Baby series, 13 issues of that, and my STARCRASHER 32-page one-shot, one and done cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. And again, you can check all that stuff out at KingComics.CA. Mark, just want to thank you once again for joining me. Really appreciate our time together, talking about some cool Image comics from the early 90s. Always fun. And unless you got anything to add, I'm going to be saying bye to our viewers. Anything else? That's it for today, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you guys very much for watching, and have yourselves an awesome day.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!